and Sustainable Barbados Recycling, Inc. The SBRC fire, Madam Chair, was resolved with assistance from the Waste Haulers Association at a cost of $192,676.50, and the Bees Recycling fire cost $122,000 and odd dollars, with a total of $314,923.50. Now, there's no mischief in this. It was an emergency situation both times. Madam Chair, multiple agencies were involved. Sanitation was involved, the fire service was involved, DEM was involved. And what happened on each occasion is that the waste haulers stepped in and they utilized their equipment, including tractors, dump trucks, in each instance to smother the flames, and it did so under the direction of the fire service. With respect to the one SBRC in particular, Madam Chair, there were like 20 dump trucks, multiple tractors operating in the direction of the fire service, and it was like a conveyor belt of trucks coming in with earth from somewhere and dumping, and the tractors using it to push and smother the flames. Now, the difficulty came in here is that after the work was done and the expense was classified and quantified, who was to pay them? The bill initially went to Sanitation Service Authority, but sanitation said, well, while the SBRC falls under them, the fact is the directions were not given by Sanitation Service Authority. DM doesn't have any money to pay them. So it got shuttled around, Madam Chair, but everybody accepted that at some point in time, the people have to be paid their owed the money. I firmly believe in one government policy, Madam Chair, and at the end of the day, the fire service put its hands up and said, well, they operated under the direction of the fire service, so we will assume responsibility for it. But obviously, this is an unbudgeted emergency expense, and it was not anywhere within the contemplation of the fire service when they were allocated funds under the estimates. So that is why we're here, to get the funds to cover the invoices for the Waste Haulers Association in assisting with the Bees fire and the SBRC fire. And to be quite frank, Madam Chair, these fires occur ever so often. And I really did not want a situation to occur where we had another major fire at one of the significant dumps in Barbados, and you need to call upon the same people to do the same thing, and they're owed since last year for the work that they did. So that is in relation to that one, Madam Chair. The second one is a supplementary to cover the expenses of the National Council on Substance Abuse. Now, the NCSA, Madam Chair, their legitimate budget tends to run in excess of $2 million. And they would have sought $2.2 million, well, they would have budgeted $2.2 million for this year. What happened, Madam Chair, is that because the situation the country was in, they were asked, yes, your budget is $2.2 million. The government can afford to allocate $1.5 million to you. You need to raise the rest through funding, trying to get grant funding, trying to get sponsorship, trying to get donations. So it was pitching on, the NCSA is perfectly positioned to secure grant funding or to secure some sort of charitable donations. And that was the intention, to take some of the burden of the NCSA, which provides a very important social fillip, for them to try to source some other funding, get corporate Barbados on board, get those international agencies that support substance abuse or the fight against illegal drugs, and try to get the additional funding from them. But then COVID hit. They were only able to raise, Madam Chair, through funding $19,000. So if your budget was $2.2 million, government gave you $1.5 million, you could only raise $19,000 through COVID, you have a significant deficit. And the deficit is what we are attempting to cover here through this supplementary. Just to put it in context for you, so people understand how important the NCSA is. The NCSA does seminars on drug treatment. It goes into the schools. the recent report that was highly publicized in the press about the drug use and substance abuse in primary school students came out of the NCSA budget. They also now, Madam Chair, have to adapt with the change in times. A lot of their seminars are now done online. Their research is now done online, and they have to fast track that. So even though we were looking at a deficit in any event, it has become more acute now because the reach to the children and the reach to the schools is now being done online, and the NCSA's equipment, Madam Chair, is woefully obsolete. So there's a significant amount in here to cover things like IT, increasing IT capacity, online research, platforms, that sort of thing. Quite frankly, the wages, how we arrived at how much to allocate to them, is that the wages and rent would have amounted to almost the 1.5. So the theory was cover that and let them try to get the grant funding, because the grant funding would normally cover the programs, but not necessarily the wages and the rent. So the wages and rent were covered by government, while the NCSA was charged to go out there and to source the funding for the actual social programs, because it'd be easier to do that and to get funding to cover their I don't correct financial term, their repeat liabilities, the wages and recurring expenditure. Thank you very much. So, Madam Chair, the amount sought under this head is simply to plug what we acknowledge to be the deficit that we hope was going to be financed through grant funding or other charitable donations. So, yes, Madam Chair. So, we are seeking supplementary funding in the amount stated to cover the programs for the National Council on Substance Abuse, and also to cover the debt owed by the fire service to the Waste Haulers Association.
Thank you.
And I move that this head stand part.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Right in support of this head, but to make a couple of comments. Yes, the fire service request for supplementals, of course, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch, he said, arises from two fires that we had last year. And these fires are, of course, fires of national import. I well remember the one at SBRC, because I would have been present as then Minister of Home Affairs. The Honourable Member was there as well that day in his capacity as Acting Attorney General, and the Honourable Member for St. Michael East was present as well in his capacity then as Minister of Environment. And yes, the issue then arose because, a bill was sent to, I think, to the Sanitation Service Authority to pay for the works and efforts by private waste haulers to out that fire, which went on for, I think, a 2-day period, and obviously would have been threatening houses, people's livelihoods, people asthmatic, and the health of the people in areas in, of course, St. Thomas, and in the case with the one at Mangrove, St. James, but Arthur, Bennett's, etc., and downwind. But, I think that it is time that we get a set protocol on this. Yes, there's one government, whether it's SSA, who is to pay the fire service, whoever else. But I strongly believe, too, that the owners of these sites, in the case where they are private owners, need to bear some of this bill. I understand where it is Mangrove, because, of course, that is owned by government, by the SSA. So clearly, government has to bear that cost. But in the case with the SBRC or any other private waste hauler, I think there may be two or three other dumps sites that are owned by private people and not by government, they ought to bear some of the costs. And I mean, you're not getting into law here, but certainly in terms of legal principles, negligence on their part, whatever, government can't have or should not have ultimately to bear the cost of a fire at a private waste hauler dump. I understand, yes. The ultimate responsibility for the security of the people of a nation is government. So yes, government is paying here, but it should be a case where, in the case where there's a fire at a private dump, that they be made to refund government some of the money because of their negligence or whatever in letting this fire come about. In a lot of cases, it may be that they have too many tires piled up. I mean, there are warning signs. These fires don't just break out. And as the Honorable Member for Christchurch, he said, this is happening quite often, on average, twice a year. I don't think they had any this year yet. They haven't had any this year yet, but last year there were 2, the year before. Under the last administration, we remember they occasionally broke out. And I mean, it can't be that, you know, people just say government has to pay all the time. And when the private owners of the relevant dump also ought to bear some liability, because they clearly are at fault. They're performing, yes, a national service in taking the waste of whatever type it is, metal, tires, whatever, but you know, they have to put proper protocols in place to lessen the probability of the occurrence of these fires, which we all concede are of national import. In terms of the National Council of Substance Abuse, clearly that supplementary is in order. Yes, certainly since this administration has come into office, in the estimates, insufficient money has been voted for the National Council of Substance Abuse, which, as the Honourable Member said, carries on a tremendously important task. When I was Minister of Home Affairs, I used to say that I don't think that the public appreciates the importance of the task of the NCSA. And, you know, I used to tell them they need to publicize their works more. That started with social media, and it has continued now. And yes, the issue of grant funding has come up, and funding from corporate persona, both nationally and international. But we know that what has happened in terms of a health pandemic over the last 7 months has put paid to the ability of a government organization such as the National Council of Substance Abuse to source funding from corporate entities. And therefore, clearly, Parliament has to step up and vote more money for this entity to try to increase its role and to make it more relevant in terms of curing drug abuse, illegal substance abuse, especially among young persons. So yes, I think 1.5 million was voted, but clearly it needs over $2 million to sustain its programs and pay all its recurrent expenses and salaries and all of that. And hence I am in full support of this head as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Honourable Member for Christchurch East.
Madam Chair, while I accept that we need to have a protocol to deal with these things, and I think coming out of this incident, it's become very, very clear that there needs to be a set protocol for dealing with it. Just by way of clarification for those who may be listening, you had a situation, Madam Chair, where the owners of the facility believed that they could have managed it themselves. We had a situation where the noxious fumes from the fire were going down and affecting a number of districts. I think one area had to be evacuated. So while they could have managed it themselves, it may have taken 5 days to put it out. And the decision was made that this was an emergency. So although they had charge of the facility, the decision was made to override anything that they were doing and for fire to take control over it and to deal with the situation. Madam Chair, we had a situation where pretty much every dump truck in Barbados was pulled off of every single construction site to ferry dirt to cover the fire. So the owners of SBRC would have taken the position, well, we didn't ask you to do all of this, we could have managed it. Fire took the position, and we as a government took the position that we could not wait for it to be managed in your time, and it had to be dealt with now as a national emergency. So there, it fell into a gray area as to exactly who was responsible for what. And as I said, the bottom line position was that the persons who worked on it in good faith, submitted their bill, and they needed to be paid. So the government undertook to pay. What happens going forward? We're probably going to have to set protocols for it, but that does not affect what happened in this instance. So, Madam Chair, I beg to move that the supplementary of $1,047,314 under head 33 stand par with one amendment, Madam Chair, that the word dollars be inserted into the figure. I think there's a slight typo in the addendum, Madam Chair.
Question is that head 33 stand part with amendment. All members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Just to remind you that we have about 2 hours left to pass these heads.
All right. Head, Madam Chair, with that in mind, we are going to skip a few heads and then go back. So we will go now to Head 86. This is the Ministry of Health and Wellness in the amount of $65,805,787.
Honorable member for the city.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The supplementary that we are asking for is a result of the fact that the ministry for the past several months, and I am including here in the ministry for the purpose of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, which I also have responsibility for, we have been executing the national COVID response out of a pre-COVID budget. And that budget obviously would have been voted for in this honorable chamber to basically facilitate the programs of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and also the operations of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But given the urgent requirement to mount the response to COVID, we've had to be taking funds from other programs to be able to get things going within the ministry. And obviously, over time, this would have created some issues in relation to cash flow and one or two other things. So that's the first thing I would like to establish here. And then obviously, the sustainability of the COVID response effort obviously requires there's some recurrent expenses, some recurrent expenditure that we have to take care of as well, especially in relation to the isolation facilities and the quarantine facilities, testing sites, and so on. So this is the primary reason behind the supplementary that we are seeking here. But I don't want to spend too much time in terms of the COVID response because I would have spoken to those issues over time, including today, when they had the opportunity to speak. And I say that because it is very important for us in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and also for the government, to get Barbadians to understand and get members of the chamber to understand that in addition to COVID, we still have the remainder of the healthcare system to provide for. And that is a considerable undertaking under normal circumstances. And I am really happy that we've been able to do both. But obviously, some things would not have gotten the level of attention that would have been required. And that is why we are seeking the supplementary, so that we can get our programs fully back on track. I would mention, for example, the nurses from Ghana. We anticipated that, and that the funds for those nurses were already included in the budget, but because we had to divert funds to do other things, we then had to now to be able to continue doing what we're doing with those nurses. And I will report that 95 nurses are employed in the healthcare sector at this point in time, 46 within the central ministry and 49 at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Out of the 46, we have the majority of the nurses assigned to the central ministry are allocated to the district hospitals, 21 at the St. Michael District Hospital or Geriatric Hospital, and there are 16 at the St. Philip District Hospital. The remainder of those nurses are spread across some of the polyclinics. At the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, they have 49, as I indicated. The majority of them, 17, are assigned to critical care unit, 9 to the accident and emergency department, 6 to the medical and surgical wards, 5 to pediatrics, and 4 to the ophthalmology department. So those nurses are fully utilized, and we now have to be able to sustain this effort for the remainder of the financial year. We also had contemplated starting the 24-hour service at the St. Clinic in St. John, Polyclinic in St. John, and that was delayed because of COVID, because obviously the nurses from Ghana were kind of critical to starting that. And we are now in a position where we are looking to start that process, and they call it a process because we have taken the decision to start the process by having extended our services in St. John. St. John normally it's like 8 to 4 Monday to Friday. We are going from 8 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. every single day of the week to see how that works, first of all. And also because we're negotiating with Transport Board, and they've been very helpful so far, so that we can allocate some routes to St. John, Polyclinic, cross-country routes, so that people from St. Andrew and St. Joseph and St. George especially would be able to benefit from that 24-hour service. And once we've been able to see what the throughput is like, by the end of March, God willing, next year, then come April, we should be able to transition then to the full 24-hour service. And by that time, we would have been in a position to have diagnostic services also included at the polyclinic, so that we know we would have diagnostic services, dialysis services, there's an asthma bay, we'd have an ambulance station there, so that the full works will be there in St. John, so that persons in that part of the country will not have to take the trek down to St. Michael to be able to access those services. And part of this supplementary obviously is going towards this effort. Apart from that, the manifesto of the Barbados Labour Party, which is influencing what we are doing, obviously government policy. We spoke to the 24-hour service in St. John, and that I just mentioned. We spoke to the Ghanaian nurses coming in to help within the general healthcare sector. And we also spoke to broken infrastructure and the need to do some repairs and remedial work to the health infrastructure, in my case, because those structures really have not had any serious work for a long time. And so some of the funds that we are seeking in the supplementary is to, for example, complete some work that has been started at the St. Philip District Hospital, where we are near We've nearly completed one ward that was out of the system for a long time. And we're also looking to do another ward, including the children's ward in St. Philip, so that we can have greater capacity in terms of hospitalization for elderly persons in Barbados. So that work is ongoing. The Albert C. Graham Children's Development Center, that is also another project that we were working on, and we will be able to complete that. This is a long time in coming. We've finished the roof replacement, remedial works, renovations. The place is really looking nicely. Those children have been out of that school for a while, having to be relocated at other installations. And through a generous benefactor, the swimming pool has been refurbished and is ready to go so that they can have their training done at the swimming pool. And we are looking around the 7th or the 8th of November to have the Albert C. Graham School fully operational again. And these funds will help us to be able to do what is required for those special children. Civil works also include, in this supplementary, we have the Brantford Tate Polyclinic. We were to construct an emergency exit for that polyclinic. It's highly utilized. There have been 1 or 2 security and safety issues there, which we had promised to deal with, and we'll be able to do that work now. And I'm sure that the staff and the persons, the clients who utilize that polyclinic would be very, very happy to know that. And then we have the Gordon Cummins District Hospital that also requires some work that we will now be able to do in this financial year. The other thing from the ministry's perspective is that, and I had indicated this sometime earlier, but when we came into office, there was a plan to close down the community outpatients clinic in St. Joseph, also St. Andrew. And I put a halt to that because the policy of this Barbados Labour Party government is to take healthcare into the community and involve at the community level. So that we put an end to that, and we had allocated some funds to refurbish the clinic at St. Joseph, which we were not able to do, but we have to do it, and we're looking really to do some work there, especially in a post-COVID environment, because that clinic and the one in St. Thomas had the capacity to deal with patients as a result of COVID was a serious challenge, and we have to do some work to be able to sort that out. And we are looking also at having to deal with the St. Andrew Clinic as well. So those are the infrastructural works that we can now do at the level of the ministry, but there are also a number of things at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital that need to be done that could not be done because funds had to be utilized to do other things to fight COVID. So for example, there are civil works to accompany the installation of some newly purchased equipment, medical gas, oxygen plant, new autoclaves that are required for the sterilization of instruments and so on, for surgeries, a donated CT scan for the Harrison Point isolation facility, and other equipment to improve the level of efficiency at the QEH. And this is an ongoing thing, and we'll be able now to do this because the QEH was very fortunate in a sense that even within a COVID environment, the QEH has been allocated about $18.5 million to replace equipment, the most money that they've ever had since the existence of the QEH. And a lot of the equipment we have here, some are on the way, and that is going to go a long way. So to be able to facilitate those new pieces of equipment, the funds are required to be able to do that. Also, we have to undertake repairs and remedial work at the pathology lab because the health and safety of staff has been severely compromised there, and this has been an issue for a little while, and we want to put that to rest. The implementation of a national cardiology project, which was approved by Cabinet recently, about $300,000, I believe, is required for the QEH so that we can start phase 1 of this most important project, in the sense that the cardiology, heart attacks and strokes are occurring in Barbados at an alarming rate, and it is absolutely certain that once we get this right, that we will be in a position to save some lives in Barbados, which is very, very important. And so the first part of that project would see some training for the emergency ambulance service personnel and also the re-equipping of those ambulances, as well as some work within the accident and emergency department, training of staff, and some other related matters that would help us to kickstart that particular project. The digitization of medical records, this is a significant thing in healthcare because we are living in the dark ages in terms of our medical records, and the QEH, more than anywhere else, of course, has a large volume of records that need to be digitized so that we can provide services in a more efficient manner, and those funds are also included in the estimates that we are seeking, the supplementary that we are seeking here. So I wanted to mention a few of those things because for the last several months, obviously, the only thing we've been speaking to would be issues relating to COVID. And people might not have recognized that in order to fight COVID, it really costs us money. But we had no choice because the public safety or the safety of the public in this country is of paramount importance to this government. And we had to ensure that funds were provided. And I really thank those who are responsible for the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment for making resources available to fight COVID. But at the same time, we need to get back now. We still have the NCD fight, and NCD still remain the leading causes of death in this country. And we are now going to be in a position to get fully back on track with the remainder of the healthcare services, both at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, in the polyclinics, and also to continue to take care of our elderly nationals and those persons who require that service. So that is the reason for the supplementary. We still have recurring costs, as I indicated before. We still have some final payments to make to some of the contractors who were on the isolation facility at Harrison Point. And the transformation of the Harrison Point facility to what it is today really is an amazing feat of which all Barbadians should be proud. And they give compliments and kudos to those people who work in the construction industry tirelessly, and the number of things that were assigned, and the vision of the Prime Minister in terms of that particular facility. And that is why I was proud to say earlier today that we have the capacity to deal with what is coming in terms of COVID and what we are facing right now. So some of those are the bills that we have to pay in relation to COVID. But generally speaking, it has to do more with going forward in relation to the remainder of the healthcare system, getting things running, doing what we said in the manifesto that we'll do in terms of the St. John Polyclinic. And I am really, really happy to see that this supplementary thing has been brought here. Thank the Honorable Minister for doing so. And we look forward to receiving the funds so that we can move forward with healthcare in Barbados. I am obliged.
Honorable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sorry, Honorable Member, could
Sorry.
you please move the head to stand park?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I beg to move that head 86 Stanley Park.
Thank you, Honorable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the opportunity to join this particular discussion because of the central importance that health has taken, especially since COVID. But even before COVID, there were so many things that we were fighting as a nation, NCDs being one of the greatest things crippling our nation and truly affecting the output and productivity of Barbados. And as I listened to the Honourable Member for the City, as he shared what is being done in relation to health, I want to join with colleagues and truly commend him for the tremendous fight that he and his team are making on behalf of this country to make health care come right for every single Barbadian. This work embodies not only what is being done at QEH, what is being done at the polyclinic, etc. This is also part of the fight for the Ministry of Health also takes place overseas in order to guarantee health to Barbadians. And the fight also goes down to the community level, where we as MPs and representatives and other community people are seeking to begin to mobilize Barbadians around the issues of health. This Saturday, in my own constituency, we are launching our first community garden, and we're going to be doing this at different points in the constituency of St. James South, because we believe that we have to guard the community against hunger, we've got to guard it against nutritional deficiency, and we have to promote health. Because I was struck by the fact that if our people are not in excellent health, they stand a lesser chance of combating COVID. Because COVID says if you do not take care of yourself physically at every level, COVID will step in to take us. And therefore, we're all involved in this fight. And I really want to encourage every Barbadian to begin to do your part, to take responsibility for your body, to take responsibility for your health, and do whatever is necessary to be able to take us forward. We've found a broken health system, and the Honourable Member for the City has spoken on a number of occasions about it. The number of things that are not there and the things that are missing. And for the good people of St. James South, this has been a particular burden and a particular pain, a point of suffering. My community tends to have older constituents, and they tend to suffer from the NCDs. Some of them may suffer from cancer. Some of them need dialysis. And therefore, when the healthcare system is not operating optimally, they suffer tremendously. And therefore, what is being done here, this money that is being voted today, is important for putting in place the necessary things to alleviate that suffering. We just lost a very precious member of our community to cancer. And during COVID, the pressure of COVID on the entire social and economic system, plus her capacity to be able to cope with what was happening in her body was too much, and we lost her. And one of the challenges was the issue of being able to get your medication from the pharmacies. And this was a particular problem for the elderly in my community. Here's COVID. They have comorbidities and they're vulnerable, and they had to be standing in lines, waiting sometimes in the sun, and some of them collapsed. It was so challenging, and that is why I really appreciate what the Honourable Member for the City did in trying to put in place some form of delivery service to help alleviate that suffering that our people were experiencing as they had to come and wait for long hours in order to get their medication. So there's a lot that has been done and more that will still be done. One of the things that I want to just share a little bit on is what is happening in relation on the international stage in relation to the issue of health. One of the things I want Barbadians to understand is that the Barbados Labour Party, under the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast and under the Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown, we believe that good healthcare service is a right. That every citizen in this country, every human being, has the right to expect that they can get access to good healthcare services. And therefore, access is important, affordability is important, and effectiveness is important. Now, how are we going to secure that on behalf of our citizens? The fight for good health care extends beyond our borders. Internationally, Barbados has to fight and make the necessary representation to ensure that space is accommodated for us to be able to access the care which we need. And this is even more important now that we are confronting COVID. Just in April this year, 2020, Barbados was able to sign on to the protocol of the WTO, which is part of the TRIPS agreement, which is the trade-related aspects related to intellectual property. And what this allows Barbados to do, we were able to join other countries who will have access to some emergency entitlements. Medication and vaccinations and so on, when they are produced, they can be extremely expensive. And because many countries cannot afford those vaccinations or the medications, or because the holders of the patent don't make it possible for them to be produced in quantities and distributed in such a way that these things can get across the globe to the people who really need it, some countries find themselves in a position where they're unable then to provide access to very necessary medication because the economic system governing the access to health care is structured in a way that only favors where we can get the biggest return on our dollar. And that puts a lot of us at a disadvantage. And so small countries like ours have to be constantly fighting for the opportunity to make sure that there's access. And this particular TRIPS agreement gives us the opportunity that if with the production of a particular medication there is a crisis, a health crisis in a nation, and we are not able to access it from the producers of the holders of that patent, and no one has been given a license to produce it for your area, that a country, a government, has the right to be able to issue licenses with regulations to either a domestic producer or to another producer that they believe will be able to produce that medication so that it is made available to their citizens. And one of the deep fears that I had as we encountered COVID, for me, was what was going to happen when a vaccine became available. How are we going to make sure that small nations like ours would get it? There are billions of people across the planet and everybody needs it. How are we going to make sure that we're going to get it? I was so happy to hear the Honourable Member for the City share what the government has put in place in relation to making a deposit to make sure that we can get some of those vaccinations available to us. But we also have, through this TRIPS measure, the opportunity that should it not be enough, should we not get it on time, that we have the option that we can afford to issue a license to someone under our emergency powers to be able to help produce that vaccine or whatever is needed to be able to assist Barbados in meeting this COVID fight. So I just wanted to make the Chamber aware of that so that we understand that this is a big one. This is a big one. And as a nation, we have to pull together what we're asking of our citizens. Healthcare and its cost will continue to rise, but prevention is much less expensive. And therefore, every citizen has to work together with the government, with their healthcare providers, with their families, to ensure that we do all that is necessary to reduce the incidence of illness by pursuing wellness, by pursuing nutrition. And I want to give kudos to the Honourable Member for St. Philip South, who has responsibility for agriculture, for the tremendous effort that he too is making in relation to producing the necessary foods which more and more Barbadians are consuming. And I want to congratulate the Barbadians who have taken up the challenge and have started their backyard farming and are beginning to grow their vegetables and grow the things that they need, that we can transition from unhealthy foods onto healthy foods. And I want to assure the Honourable Member for the City that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade will continue to work with him on these matters, along with the NCDs, and work with the issue of health and trade so that we can begin to use the tools at our disposal to protect our population from things that are harmful to them and that will not allow us to pursue or manage the NCDs that are affecting our population. So I just want to congratulate the Honourable Member and the Honorable Member in the Ministry of Finance for making all of this possible.
Thank you. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. Just two brief queries. Only two. I noticed that there is in the supplementary request an amount of 25 million for the QEH related to COVID. I'm not going to question that. Understand that you've been running, from what the minister said, you've been running the COVID program on expenditure which would have been voted for other purposes. But what I do have to question is the 10 million, again to QEH, 10,652,000. My question really has to do not so much with that, with the sum of money, but with the performance of the health levy that the government had put in place, and to query the minister as to the level of effectiveness, all things considered, of the health levy today. The other thing has to do with approximate $10 million spent on other personal emoluments. And my question would have to be simply this: reasonably so. Are these new people, or are these people who have been already employed? You have to find money to continue paying, or is this a plan to take on new people, or is it a combination of both? Now, my honorable friend from St. James Central has said 2 or 3 times today that this is what he calls the silly season. And in the silly season, people say silly things. Now, I know he's been listening a bit closely to his own platform, and that is why he has said that. And I hope this is not a silly thing. I'm simply asking, are these new people coming on to work that you have to pay, or are these people who are working that you don't have to find supplemental funds to pay, or is it a combination of both?
Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Madam Chair, I rise to support the request for funds to place at the disposal of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Just to reinforce the point that the government has been, from the inception, first and foremost ensuring that we will protect the public and that we will make resources available to ensure that the management of the rest of the healthcare system can be continued to respond to the health needs of Barbadians in the country. Now, I just want to make it clear that you would appreciate that the government, when we came to office, we had implemented a number of measures which were sought, in a sense, to give additional support and more consistency with respect to the operation of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. You would recall, Madam Chair, that we introduced the health service contribution, which allowed us to be able, which obviously is administered by the National Insurance Scheme and remitted to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital on a monthly basis once contributions are paid, obviously, by employers. Now, obviously, in the COVID-19 environment, as you are aware, Madam Chair, the National Insurance Scheme, since the end of March this year, has paid over $120 million in unemployment contributions. And obviously, that is as a result of the fact that a large number of Barbadians, just over 32,000 Barbadians, have been unemployed as a result of COVID-19. And therefore, the level of the health service contribution that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital received, certainly since the beginning of this financial year, would have reduced significantly. And what we have had to do, as you would recall, Madam Chair, when we voted here on the appropriation bill in March, that we had initially allocated $116 million or so for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and we have been using those funds with respect to because ordinarily Those funds would have been disbursed in 12 equal installments over the course of the year. The health service contribution would have been coming in as per normal, and the hospital would have been able to do its work. And therefore, we've had to make adjustments, obviously, with respect to the advance of the $116 million. And therefore, in response to COVID, given what we had voted at the beginning of the year, and as the minister said, the government, certainly through the Ministry of Health, has had to respond clearly to a very rapidly changing environment. And we have been monitoring certainly the budgets, both of the ministry as well as the QEH, to ensure that they can get through on the basis of what we would have initially allocated. But now is the time, since we are now at the beginning of the second half of the financial year, to ensure that we can go through to the remainder of the financial year in a smoother fashion as possible. And so, monies that you see here voted really is intended to ensure that we can continue to support fully the COVID-19 response that the Ministry of Health and Wellness has mounted very successfully since the beginning of this year, but equally to ensure that the operations of the QEH, because you will recall, Madam Chair, that the establishment of the isolation facility at Harrison Point, as well as obviously the operation of the various quarantine centers, that has a cost. And we have created a specific head under the QEH to be able to focus specifically on those monies that we are spending exclusively on COVID. A number of resources have been made available to the Ministry of Health and as well as the QEH in terms of whether it's the COVID-19 monitoring unit to be able, Madam Chair, to deal with any issues related to contact tracing. And I know the Minister and his team has been working quite hard with respect to that. And as we ramp up the testing, which we would anticipate, Madam Chair, that with the resumption of commercial flights coming into the country, that the testing regime and the personnel required for that, the resources for the lab required for that will have to be done. And that we anticipate will continue so long as commercial flights increase on a daily basis. And I really want to commend the Minister and his staff, as well as the QEH, and for their management of this process, because as you would appreciate, it is a logistical exercise that requires a level of meticulousness that is absolutely critical. And the resources that we're placing at the disposal of the ministry, as well as the QEH, would allow Barbados to continue to remain open. And as the minister said in his opening remarks, and well, I think on the emergency bill, that we continue to work on ensuring that we keep people safe, but we have to keep the economy open in order to be able to deliver certainly the financing mechanism that is required and supporting in this measure. Now, Madam Chair, you would recognize that we have made some adjustments to the overall budget. A number of programs obviously have had to be scaled back across government in order to help to finance some of these expenditures. And the reality is that that is where we have been quite responsive, because we have to prioritize on ensuring that we build the capacity within the health system. The minister indicated that outside of these expenditures, a number of critical pieces of equipment certainly have been, as we would have voted at the end of the last financial year, and those pieces of equipment, as I'm sure for the QEH, will be made obviously available to the members of the public once obviously they are commissioned. And the truth is, our response has been fully supported by the whole of government. And I think that Barbadians can feel comforted that this government is actually in a position to focus on not just the COVID response, but to equally beef up a number of the service delivery across the health service that will be critical. But I can only urge, as the minister has urged the members of the public to do, is every Barbadian, Madam Chair, must continue to follow the protocols. Each Barbadian must take the responsibility for keeping themselves, their families, their friends safe and follow the protocols, even though, and we know that we have been quite successful in not having any community spread in Barbados. That is as a result of each Barbadian playing their part in allowing us to be able to go about our day-to-day activities. And so long as we continue, Madam Chair, to be able to do that, then I am confident that we will be able to keep the economy open. We will be able to continue to do the appropriate risk management as it relates to visitors and all Barbadians who are returning home with respect to travel. And the ministry certainly has been on the ball with respect to the classification of countries and the protocols that they've put in place in order to ensure that persons not just get the second test, but that they are absolutely clear and comfortable with respect to persons interacting in the society. And as with everything in life, Madam Chair, there's risk to everything. So there's risk to persons traveling into the country. There's risk of because everybody may have a slightly different incubation period, if you like. But I'm comfortable that certainly the public health personnel have all the tools that they require at this point to be able to do the various testing with respect to COVID-19, as well as any potential avenue for tracing, should that be required. And I can only ask that Barbadians continue to work with the officials of the Ministry of Health where required in order to ensure that if something happens, that we can get to the bottom of it quickly so that we can contain. And as we go through the next few months, we are seeing clearly a number of cases rising across North America and Europe, and therefore we have to keep the economy open. We have to ensure that we can do so responsibly, and therefore some of the resources especially as it relates to COVID-19, made available to the Ministry of Health as well as to the QEH, would allow Barbados to continue to mount a response that is commensurate with the risk that we have to effectively take in order to keep this Barbados economy open. And the reality, Madam Chair, is whilst we will continue to monitor very carefully the response from a health perspective, as we have opened back, more persons have gone back to work, and therefore we would anticipate that there would be a small uptick in terms of the health service contribution with respect to that. I know that on the resolution, there's under the Ministry of Finance for EGFL, there's a request for the initial support for the Barbados Employment and Sustainability Program, but we anticipate that as more and more persons go back to work, then the health service contribution will be able to be boosted between now and the end of the financial year, so that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the contribution that they would have seen the decline in at the during the first half of this financial year, that we would dearly love it to recover fully by the end of the financial year, but we are confident that even if we don't meet that target, that the sums being made available here for the QEH will be able to make up for that shortfall to allow for the normal provision of services which they would normally do in the absence of COVID. So the reality is we are making the resources available to the Ministry of Health as well as the QEH, and the personnel, certainly with respect to additional testing, contact tracing, we're making those monies available, and that is going to be absolutely critical in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, Madam Chair, with those few words, I'm obliged to you, and I support this measure.
Honorable member for the city.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I beg to move that the supplementary provision in the amount of 85,805,000.
65 million.
65, sorry. $787 under head 86 stand for.
Question is that head 86 stand for. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 34, Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, in the amount of $25,081,700.
Honorable member for St. Michael South Central.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I listened with extreme interest and excitement as the previous head was discussed. Extreme excitement because it is representative of the stellar and unique and unmatched leadership of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and the Prime Minister of Barbados and the entire cabinet, I would say, in addressing the matter of COVID-19 and its response in the area of health. What we have been seeing recently in a lot of research and a lot of what people have found is that countries that have been able to limit the impact in terms of number of deaths have also seen a similarly limited impact in terms of GDP growth. So it means that countries that have been successful in limiting the deaths and really having a strong healthcare response have also been able to have a strong economic response or to be able to limit the economic fallout. Barbados is recorded at having to date 20 deaths per million, which puts it ahead of 120 countries in the world. And just as we have had to have that very focused and innovative response in the area of health, we've had to be similarly innovative in the area of economic policy. And so, as we have had to expand the national insurance response to the tune of 120 million to 32,000 people, which would have been 5 times the kind of the scale of unemployment claims that we would ordinarily see with respect to any shock. We've had to come up with new governance arrangements so that, and an advanced payment system, for example, so that those payments were able to be rolled out, especially the initial payments were able to be rolled out quickly. Similarly, this request for supplementary provision under Head 34 is in respect of another kind of innovative policy that we've had to quickly put in place to address the fact that there has been tremendous expenditure related to COVID-19, not just in terms of healthcare, but also in terms of social protection, making sure that people have food to eat, making sure that students have the digital infrastructure to be able to function, and all the other knock-on effects and all the other sectoral responses. We've also had to address a tourism sector that is over 40% of the labor market, over 40% of GDP, and the fact that having people unemployed for extended periods in that sector is extremely detrimental to the future survival of the country. You're not just talking about lost wages, lost income today, but as we know, people who, the longer somebody stays unemployed, the harder it is for them to find employment again. And so it was very important for us to be able to address tourism, direct and indirect tourism services, as a part of the economic response. It was important for us to be able to help people get back into work in the tourism sector, even as we are now starting to see the return of flights and the return of tourism activity. We could not wait, Madam Chair, for those people to get back to work. And what we've done with the Barbados Employment and Sustainable Transformation Plan is to say, listen, we expect that in several months, the tourism sector will come back to where it has been before, not in the same style and not in the same form, but we expect it to return. In the meantime, there are certain things that we can do to make sure that the Barbados tourism product is much more competitive than others that at that time will be trying to compete with us. And so the Barbados Employment and Sustainable Transformation Plan, we agreed last month, and we launched, we agreed it to roll out last month, does a few things. It includes a comprehensive training program to make sure that people upskill in the sector, make sure that we take the opportunity to really be able to, as the younger among us might say, to really be able to level up in terms of what we're offering to consumers in that space. And so we didn't want to wait until the sector was fully reopened. This is the time to take this opportunity to figure out where the gaps are and to be able to fill those gaps with respect to capacity development. And so this is being implemented with the assistance of the National Transformation Initiative, being able to set standards of performance and delivery with people who work in the tourism sector. In addition, there is a financial arrangement that sees a grants program and a preference share program being introduced to provide for a few things. One, and this is extremely important, to make sure that there is employee re-engagement. And how that will work is that the preference share program provides funds to meet 80% of the wages and salaries of employees as at December 2019. Now, Madam Chair, there are several jurisdictions that are attempting or are rolling out a similar plan. Barbados is the only one that is meeting wages and salaries at 80%. Germany, the UK, others are matching at 60, are providing at 60, 65, 75%. We are saying, listen, we believe in this sector. We believe not just in the sector, but in the fact that we need to be able to support workers and their families in the largest sector in Barbados, and we are going to make that investment. It also supports, Madam Chair, investment in greening and digitization. Now, the sector has for a long time been calling for a better and more thorough use of renewable energy technologies, renewable energy installations, including PV systems, water conservation, and so on. And what the sector could also benefit from is increased use of technology and process digitization so that they can upgrade their business processes. Now, there have been similar initiatives in other spaces. I recall that in the US, when the automotive industry was flagging terribly, when several jobs were at stake, when people's lives and livelihoods were hanging in the balance, the then administration had to step in and work with the automotive industry to find and agree on a transformation plan for that sector in which the government would invest. It had great success. And it had great success because it focused on doing all the things that really the sector needed to do to transform itself. So it was not just throwing new money after something that was not delivering. It was a matter of having a frank conversation of what is needed to really grow the sector and having an agreement to invest in that in a particular way. BEST also seeks to invest in what we call supply chain management, which is something that many of us even before we came to this place, have been calling for, which is to see the deeper integration of local agriculture, manufacturing, services, and cultural and creative industries in the provisioning of the tourism sector. We want entrepreneurs in these spaces to be engaged in the tourism sector. We want to make sure that tourism plants, tourism firms are procuring locally to the as far as possible, and to make sure that we are building resilience into that supply chain, so that when there is another similar shock, we hope not, but if there is, that we are left less vulnerable to the vagaries of what's happening in global supply chains, and we've developed our local supply chains so that we have some resilience to whatever is happening in the external market. And it also focuses on upgrading of the plants through refurbishment and expansion of the properties, and we envision that all of these together, the greening, the plant upgrades, and the digitalization, which is really the modernization of process, are going to create several more jobs in addition to the jobs that are the people who are returning to work under the employee re-engagement. I want to say, Madam Chair, at this time, that in terms of the response to BEST, we've seen so far, and more every week, 26 hotels becoming engaged, and 1,600 worker applications associated with that. We expect that this week, 1,000 of those workers will be re-engaged, are being re-engaged in their various tourism firms where they worked before. But this is also called, Madam Chair, for a governance arrangement, because the process of being able to receive the applications, review the applications, look at certain financial information that is going to tell us whether these are good investment decisions, that has to be done somewhere. And it is being done in the Enterprise Growth Fund Limited. We've had to put a governance structure in place there. I would like to suggest that at the appropriate time, that document that lays out the governance structure be made a document of the House, because I think it's important to know and to see that this is a transparent process that is really about workers and their families, and not simply about investment in the private sector, although that investment is important because of the impact on work. And so we've set up that structure within the EGFL. It has been working. The 25 million that is allocated here is an initial outlay to be able to fund the BEST program currently. Obviously, when these estimates were developed, this was not contemplated. We didn't know that COVID would happen. We didn't know that we would have this tremendous impact on unemployment and implications for severance and so on. And so we are asking that this 25 million be allocated for this purpose. The other part, small part of the supplementary provision is $81,000 that is for professional services related to certain very important things that conversations that we have to have in the international space. Now, being chair of CSME, having a prime minister who is really very involved in leading global dialogues on many things, and global dialogues not just for the sake of them, global dialogues that are going to have an impact on how Barbados is able to finance its programs, how Barbados is able to treat with its debt, the idea of being able to ring fence or separate out COVID-related debt so that we treat it more as long-term debt, so that it becomes more sustainable. All these types of conversations are important. The fact that we have a voice in the IMF World Bank Development Committee, we have an opportunity that Barbados certainly didn't have in the 10 years prior to this administration, Because if you can't manage your own affairs at home, nobody's going to listen to you if you come and try and tell them how to do things where they are. But now, having proven and having gotten great credibility in terms of being able to manage our affairs here, locally, and in the region, the world is listening to Barbados. But we have to put ourselves in the position to speak with authority. We have to be able to research certain ideas. We have to be able to do the work that is required, for example, in the idea of how we understand risk and vulnerability in small island states. I was involved in a previous life in some work on a vulnerability index. And it is an argument, it is an area of work that the Global South has been engaged in for some time to say to the international community, you cannot use the same criteria for small island states, for emerging economies, that you use for larger, more developed economies. It is a conversation and a decision whose time has come. Everywhere we look, we see the differential access to resources, the differential access even to medical resources, even to supply chains globally that are really impacting how small states can respond to COVID. And so this 81,000 is to be able to engage an advisor and other professional services for a limited period of 5 months to be able to put together certain arguments in some upcoming international engagements that the Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment will have. The main activities for this relate to determining the most appropriate mechanisms, as I said, for the financing of COVID-related debt, settling how we use vulnerability index, coming up with some recommendations to improve capacity and skills as well as execution rates in the Caribbean, because the Caribbean has an under-execution problem. We have the skills and the capacity, but sometimes we're not able to execute at the rate that we'll see the pace of development that we want. We need to look at how we deepen the relationships with CARICOM and the Caribbean Development Fund and other mechanisms that were set up to make sure that the Caribbean would start to thrive and have the governance mechanisms that we need to do our business. Improving access to grant funding, because we more and more need concessional resources to be able to do our business. And also looking at facilitating the recommendations of the CARICOM Commission on the Economy, which is also about how the Caribbean community comes together to advocate for better terms for how it does its business. So these two projects, these two areas of work are what drive this request for supplementary funding. Madam Chair, and with those words, I beg to move that Head 34 stand part.
Thank you. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. Again, just a couple of brief remarks. I don't think necessarily that the majority of former hotel workers or hotel workers who have suffered loss of employment as a result of the COVID situation are necessarily persuaded that the BEST program, the BEST program, best serves their interests. I think there is a large body of opinion among them which would suggest, the view is, that this helps the capital interests, the private sector interests involved in tourism economic activity in Barbados. They have concerns about the challenges now posed on the new regimes with respect to the severance benefits regime. They have concerns with respect to the number of days per week, perhaps, that they may be privileged to have employment under new arrangements. There are already concerns about reduced levels of pay, and that is in addition to the fact that we start out with a 80% ceiling already in place. And there are, if I'm to believe what I'm hearing, hotels which would have already gone back into operation, who are subjecting some of their workers to these reduced levels of pay. So I'm not too sure that the honorable member out of St. Michael South Central, honorable minister in the Ministry of Finance, would find large-scale agreement with her perspective that that BEST program serves their interests above all else. Concern I have, additionally, is this. It is a ploy of governments when the pressure is on, when challenges are met, and when we reach certain points in the electoral cycle, to ensure that they do their very level best to reduce that body of opinion that expresses itself with disfavor on some of their policies. If I might put that into very simple language and illustrate, governments sometimes identify those with credible voices who express an opinion in the interests of the masses, in the interests of the country, and not in a partisan way. And if they have to be critical of the policies of government, they are not afraid to do so. They are independent enough to feel free to do so, and they're credible enough to be believed. And one of the tactics that governments would use is to see how governments can incorporate them into the service of the government and thereby silence their voices. They do it with people from the media. Indeed, they do it sometimes from within the bosom of the own administration. Persons who are not necessarily in cabinet may be called to function in areas of endeavor that causes them to be silent on certain issues about which they would otherwise be loud. They reach into academia and they take out those, again, with credible voices who are not afraid to speak in a critical fashion about government policy and the challenges that the country would face. And they incorporate their services into the efforts of the administration and therefore quiet their voices. So you add people to the National Insurance Board, you add people to the Central Bank Board, you create consultancy positions, and you give them, we have here a consultancy service position, again being identified, of an individual who has spoke with some degree of credibility and with some degree of passion with reference to government policy, and he's not always been in favor, has not always supported what government has said or done. But he is now to be recruited as a consultant. I think the figure here is $81,000. And this will put this individual in a position where he is no longer able to critique publicly government's policy in an unfavorable fashion. I have a serious concern about that. I don't think in the history of this country, and tell me about COVID, yes, I'm sure you will, the Minister of Finance has such a core of advisors. I mean, when does it end? There's another consultant, even though for a brief period. When does it end? When do we come to the place where we say, look, we can't afford this anymore, and perhaps this money could be used otherwise, and perhaps this service could be provided by some existing individual or entity? When do we come to that place? How can we criticize the former administration, spending $20 million on consultancy services and then come every month, every week to engage some other individual to do some other aspect of consultancy work? Always, seemingly, or most frequently, I should say, to the ministry of finance. But here we go again. The money spent is one thing. The job to be done is important. The service to be rendered is important. But can't we find an existing mechanism, an existing functionary who can do this? Now $25,000, $81,000 to do this over a few months. And in so doing, we silence a voice which could otherwise be unfavorably critical of government policy. We can silence an opposition in many ways, or we can silence opposition in many ways. And one of the ways to silence opposition is to buy opposing voices into your service arrangements. They will then work for you, but cannot openly offer criticism of you. And I fear that we are embarked upon that path.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I will endeavor to wrap up quickly, and in so doing, try to respond to some of the usual noise. Just to quickly reiterate on the question of whether there is buy-in for the program, I think that having signed 26 hotels up and having seen the interest of over 1,600 workers in a couple short weeks indicates interest. I know that it is very attractive to set up straw men so that people can try their best to fatigue themselves by tearing them down, but we don't have time in this COVID environment with straw men. We have time with legitimate concerns as a government, and we always commit to addressing them. But the question of whether there's interest, there's a simple answer. The question of whether there's worker buy-in, there's a simple answer that there is, because we have had, before we came up with this, in the course of developing this, I would say, and this is based on my limited but growing number of years on this planet, that I have never seen a more consultative government or system of governance than I have seen in the last 2.5 years of this Barbados Labour Party administration. We came from a social partnership that had been decimated and disrespected under the last administration, and gave it new life, gave it a new level of respect and engagement. And it is on that basis that we have come up with the economic policies that we have in order to respond to the people of this country. And so, yes, there is buy-in. That's the simple answer. The other thing I would say on the question of the matter of contracting services and where will it end, and I will say frankly to you, it will not end. Because the other thing that we have to do to step fully into the third decade of the 21st century is to realize that the structure of work, the nature of work, the way that we engage professional services is also changing. And if this weren't represented in these estimates under professional services, it would be under the regular wages and salaries recurring expenditure of the government of Barbados. And so whether it is in the permanent contractual arrangements or whether it is, as it is under the $40 million COVID relief program, for 12 months of engaging people in a number of ways, the nature and structure of work is changing. It is a conversation that we are having with the social partnership. It is a conversation that we are having with labor, with the private sector, with the third sector, because we all realize that we have to be able to engage work in new and varied ways. And we don't make apologies for that, because we are not doing it under cover of darkness. We're doing it right here in this chamber. And so when we engage small contractors as part of Golden Square or Fairchild Street or Constitution River or any other project or any other project, when we engage people to work on an at first temporary basis, that is legitimate work. So I don't know where we're drawing any false dichotomy between the services that are offered by a consultant or an economist in the Ministry of Finance and other kinds of professional services offered by artisans or offered by masons or offered by anybody else, because those are also professional services, and I don't hear any complaints about those. This nature and structure of work is changing, and I think all of Barbados realizes that. And so I hope, although, I think that hope might be in vain, that at some point, what I would like to see an end to is this false argument that suggests that there's something wrong in the contracting of services. It is done all the time in a very transparent way. And so I am happy to be able to answer that particular question. And I'm happy to be able to repeat the fact that these governance arrangements and any contract for services or any agreement that is signed with anyone who's engaged by this government is a matter of public record. And so, Madam Chair, with those very few words, I would like to move that head 34 in the amount of $25,081,000 stand part.
Question is that head 34 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it.
Head 35, Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, in the amount of $4,457,000.
Honorable member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wish to indicate the project that we're working on that merits this budget of $4.457 million. It is more or less what I would consider breaking new ground in Barbados in the light that the Community Elder Care Program, which is a novel project, is dearly designed to complement what the National Assistance Board is doing. As a result of COVID, we have got so many thousands of seniors across the island who have become so lonely. Many of them are not in family settings so that the other relatives and friends are close to them or are able to look after them. And of course, you will appreciate, Madam Chair, that so many of them, you're in the medical field, you know, some immediately become depressed. They just want someone to talk with, someone to share the history that they have in their heads with. Many of them are not fully bedridden, but many of them are in the household with no one to communicate with them or share anything at all. And this concept is for persons living in the communities or the villages, as we will know, who know these individuals, to meet with them, go to the households, chat with them, do small chores, worship with them, because some of them do require that, read with them, to be able to give that kind of personal touch to make the difference. It is a concept, ma'am, that we're looking at and we have sought to implement, where it will help to rekindle that spirit of community service and community life with these senior persons. We are all aware that our society is an aging one. We have thousands of people coming on board. Some of them have mild dementia, some have full-blown Alzheimer's, but some of them are still in their right minds, but because of some kind of disability or some kind of illness that they cannot move around, and having been in the households for so many months, they are really feeling down-spirited. And so we have invited persons to indicate their ability, their capacity. Some of them have training, some have no training at all, but they have the experience, where they have been living with their own parents before, or caring for other persons, and because of the economic situation and the COVID impact, they have no employment anymore. Because families have said to others, we don't want anybody in the homes if our families know that COVID is in the air, even though they were not the bedridden. You will appreciate, ma'am, that the National Assistance Board has got over 1,200 persons who have suffered numerous illnesses and therefore cannot be on their own. And that's where the home helpers were. But this project is complementary to helping or working with those who are mild situations and not to in any way impact on what the NAB is doing. It's more complementary. And so I also want to indicate that having done our investigations from since early 2019, when we recognize how our numbers for the aged are growing, they're expanding, and there's so many vulnerable persons in our communities, we sought to identify them, have everything categorized, not only from that perspective, but also from the perspective of if we have really bad weather, and many of those seniors cannot get out. So we've compiled a book or documentation on the most vulnerable in our communities, and therefore it makes it even easier where we can identify them to be able to engage persons, to work with them and to rekindle their spirits. And so this project, we would like to see it start up sometime soon, within the next few weeks, so that the linkages in the communities can continue, and our younger persons who will be engaging those senior citizens will get a chance to know the history of Barbados. Make sure those generational links are rekindled, and therefore do service to the people in the villages. They will also have the responsibility of reporting any matters to do with abuse or neglect, and so on, to the respective agencies, the Ministry of Health, the police, and other agencies that will be able to treat to those matters. And so, ma'am, I wish to indicate that the $4.4 million will go towards the project so that Barbadians can feel rest assured that the seniors who are in communities that are not being looked after will get that opportunity, because it will be persons living among them who will be attached to them to be able to bring elements of comfort, peace, and safety to them. And therefore, this $4.457 million is assigned to this budget, this supplementary, for the care of the elderly in the various communities across the length and breadth of Barbados.
Please ask that the headstand part. Please ask that the headstand part.
Yes, ma'am. I beg that head 35 stand part to the tune of $4.457 million for the elder care program in the communities.
Thank you. There being no speakers, Honorable Member for St. Thomas, could you do the wrap up, please? Nobody? She doesn't have to. Okay, go ahead. You're going to vote on it? Yeah, just to move that headstand part. Have a seconder. Could I have a seconder? You had a seconder? Seconder, Adrian. Okay, it's all right. Question is that head 35 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 39. The Ministry of International Business and Industry, in the amount of $2,286,859.
Thank you.
Honorable Member for St. Michael North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The sum being sought today is simply to enable the Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, CIPO, to be able to secure and implement an information technology system, to be able to modernize its operations and improve its efficiency. We all hear the complaints from time to time in relation to that department. As I say, some quite justified, some entirely unjustified. We hear that things are taking too long to be processed. Lawyers complain that they're being called and being told they need to change things that they cannot see or understand why on earth they have to change them. They rush off and they make calls to every minister. They call me, they call the Prime Minister, everything with a whole host of complaints. I am asked sometimes to go and intervene, to check on things, to see if I can get them expedited. Sometimes when I go, I see the complaint is valid. Other times I see that, in fact, the complaint not only is it not valid? But you can't believe how an attorney at law could have submitted so much foolishness. So it is a pendulum that swings both ways, Madam Chair. But the time has come when we have to recognize that there is a genuine need for improvement. You have to move now from manual and physical to digital. That's the move we have now to make, to digitalize the corporate registry. As it stands now, in relation to the incorporation of entities, you have a situation where, yes, an application can be made online, but thereafter, really, everything else is pretty much physical. It's not as if when the application is made, the information automatically goes into the database. Instead, it has to then be typed in manually into the database, and the processing of the application then is done manually, and the preparation of the certificate of incorporation, again, is a manual process. And when it comes to payment, to be able to use any sort of online payment, you must set up an account, register as an agent, from which any expense you incur would be deducted. That is clearly, Madam Chair, in the context of the 21st century, a very archaic system. What we have to move to is a straight through online processing system where you are able to make your application online, make your payment online, have your application processed online, and your certificate of incorporation also issued online with all the security features involved in the process. And that is really what has been decided, that after a long period of time, that this was long overdue, and it has now been decided that we have to move to that stage. And the sum being sought today, Madam Chair, is to ensure that we secure and install this system. Gone must be the days when what I just outlined continues to be the way that things are done at the corporate registry. We also, in the process, if I may just say this by way of additional information, we sought to ensure that we got the best that we could get. We decided to democratize the process, where we actually invited the most frequent users of the registry, from among the most frequent users of the registry, to actually witness a demonstration of not only this system, but the system of the competition. And it was the view of those frequent users of the corporate registry that, in fact, the features associated with this solution that is being to be secured now, that the features more than adequately suited the needs of the needs that had to be met by the registry. So we, as I said, Madam Chair, we democratized the process. These sums being sought today will take us through phase 1, which will last approximately 4 months. This will deal largely with the process, as I said earlier, from application for incorporation up to the stage of securing a certificate of incorporation. As I said, that should last about 4 months. After that, we'll move to phase 2, where an additional sum of $1.9 million will be sought to take us then from the process of incorporation through to dissolution, or post-incorporation through to dissolution. And that would then complete. That second phase should take approximately 6 months, so that by this same time next year, Madam Chair, we should be able to say comfortably that we have in fact fully digitalized the Corporate Affairs Department. And that, if I may say, Madam Chair, is just part of the overall plan to fully digitalize what I would refer to as the business arm of the ministry, because we have already put in place a digital IT solution to enable the full digitalization of the economic substance legislation. All the applications are done and processed online. This will be the phase we move to, now phase 1 we are moving to. And then, as I said, 4 months hence, approximately, we should move on to phase 2, so that the corporate registry as well would be fully digitalized. And in addition, Madam Chair, we also are going to be digitalizing the area of the International Business Unit, where we are going to be implementing another IT solution there to facilitate all applications now to the International Business Unit online as well. Have fully digitalized application and processing systems in relation to the International Business Unit. But that will be spelled out in great detail when we actually get to that phase. But we should get there very shortly. And then you can see that entirely in its full spectrum, there's a full digitalization of all aspects of the business arm of the Ministry of International Business and Industry. So, Madam Chair, I'm here today to seek, as I said, the sum of $2,286,859 to enable us to have phase 1 complete of the digitalization of the Corporate Affairs Department. I beg to move, Madam Chair, that this head stamp part.
Question is that head 39 stamp part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it.
Head 81, Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources, in the amount of $1,430,000.
Honorable member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The sum being sought under Head 81 has to do with road improvement bridge study, part of a CDB loan. We are currently looking at bridges in the Scotland district, as you are aware, as part of our overall planning for the development of that area. And the bridges in question relate to St. Simon's, St. Saviour's, Thompson Bridge, and also the one at Trio Path. The bridges were investigated, new designs were built, and the designs for the new bridges have been submitted. So the ministry is therefore seeking the sum of $1.430 million to pay the consultants for professional services rendered. Of course, 529 was not an open head, and that's also being addressed. So therefore, Madam Chair, with those few words, I beg to move that this head stamp part.
Question is that head 81 stamp part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. I think the ayes have it.
Head 82, Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, in the amount of $3,027,375.
Honorable member for Christchurch West Central.
Madam Chair, I want to thank you. I want to start by saying that metaphorically, this speaks to refuse collection that was supposed to be literally collected prior to 2018 as it relates to matters associated with the last administration. And I want to say that in the era where garbage was pulled across Barbados, no one found it fit to awaken themselves from their slumber, to recognize that garbage presented a problem in this country. And so I want to thank the former Minister of the Environment and National Beautification for moving with a pace to ensure that there were vehicles brought in to deal with this problem, this damning problem that seek to threaten not only the health of this country, but the biological and natural diversity as we know it in relation to the ecosystems and the conservational areas. Garbage presents a problem in every single part of the world. And so I am happy to say that this money will be part of the payment. We have already started paying a sum already, and the $3 million, $27,375 will represent payment to the central bank that is owed this money. But I want to also say that in between this period of time, 2018 to present, and the Member of Parliament for Christchurch, he spoke about 2 years, 5 months. And I will probably go on to say 3 weeks, 7 hours to 26 minutes and 5 seconds. In between that period of time, this government bought 26 compactor trucks, 2 skip trucks, 2 skid steers, 1 dumper, 2 10-wheelers, 1 water truck, 1 response truck, 1 D9, 1 booming compactor, which is being used at the landfill. And I want to also say that over the last month, we got 2 split units that understanding, of course, that we must encourage Barbadians now to be involved in the 4 R's, which is to reduce, reuse, recycle, and recover in a circular way, so that every single ounce of purchase from garbage will become part of a circular Barbados, because that is what we are seeing now in these times. And of course, and you will see the ads in the papers, we have also extended a tendering process for a shredder, which will be responsible for shredding all those tires. And I want to say that we can have about 8,000 tires per month being exposed to our dump and our landfill. And we are saying, again, in a circular way, because that is what we are talking across Barbados, whether in the fisheries, whether it's in the part of the diversity in terms of the economy, that we must talk about circular Barbados. And so the rubber and the remnants of the tires will certainly go back in the production of roads, sporting surfaces, of course, and even in the agriculture industry, where it can be used as part of the mulch. And this is what the type of conversations that we are having in Barbados. And so, Madam Chair, I want to say that we will continue, and you have already heard me expose the fact that illegal dumping will be something of the past, and I already said that those who dump illegally will be dumped before the law courts. I will say it again, and I will say it because I know my mother listens to this parliamentary debate, not because of only her son, but she understands the importance of what this government is doing. And if she was at any point in time decide that she's going to run afoul of the law, I know she like rice and stew, and I will carry some wherever she goes when the law deals with her. And I'm saying it to every single Barbadian. Illegal dumping is something that will not be tolerated, because it destroys not only the ecological fabric of this country, but it destroys your future, your unborn child as we know it, because when you dump illegally, you are killing a country, Barbados. We can't have a song by the iconic Mary Man called Beautiful, Beautiful Barbados, and Barbados is full of garbage. No, Madam Chair. I am saying today that, and I want to thank Corporate Barbados, who came on board over the last couple of weeks and said, Minister, if you are serious, we are serious too, and they're going to provide us with cameras at all the illegal dumping sites. It's called, there's something, there's an app on the phone called Minister is Watching. I'm not a voyeur, but I will see those who are dumping illegally in this country. And I have on my phone, Madam Chair, where I got 2 or 3 persons, base skips in the community that are empty, and Barbadians are putting the garbage alongside the skip. There must be a paradigm in the way how we treat our disposal of garbage. We must come to a Christian understanding and a fulsome way where we recognize that while we destroy our gullies, our ecosystem, and our surroundings, we are destroying ourselves. So I'm saying today that this practice must be a thing of the past, and I'm happy that we will be able to facilitate the collection of garbage with these additional garbage trucks, and we will move certainly with every connective tissue of the being of the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, and certainly with every sinew of this government to ensure that we have a clean, healthy, prosperous, and beautiful Barbados, as the song suggests. With those few words, I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and I move that this head now stand in power.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, ma'am. And I appreciate the energy, the enthusiasm of my honorable friend from Christchurch West Central. Just 2 things, again. And one is, I may be the only person in this chamber possessed of this view or sense, but it seems to me that we have a re-emerging garbage collection problem in Barbados. I've been observing that over the past several weeks. Maybe it is only where I travel. I travel just about everywhere. And it seems to me that the garbage pileups in increasing numbers across Barbados. I don't know if anybody else in the House senses that or would admit to that if they do sense that. I'm not about to attribute blame or anything like that. It's a concern, and if the minister is not so inclined to be of that view. He may be unaware, because Christchurch West Central is all clean. But perhaps he can consult with a few of his colleagues. But it does seem to me as though we have a re-emerging problem with garbage collection for whatever reason. I've wondered if we have problems with the trucks that we do have. The other thing is, sir, through you, ma'am, I have had complaints on several occasions about a dumping site on President Kennedy Drive, just at the corner of Hood Road, just outside Richmond area. It's a very unhealthy site. Nasty odors when you pass there. It's right in the face of some people's homes. It's not a legal dumping site. I've written to the Sanitation Service Authority about it on behalf of the residents who have complained, and nothing has been done about that. I am sure, through you, ma'am, that the Honorable Minister, once he is aware, as he now is, will make sure that it is addressed. And I would suggest, if I may be so presumptuous as to do so, that he goes to the site with his camera and take the photo so that he may be able to properly impress those at the Sanitation Service Authority. This is indeed a problem in St. Michael West, which you need to attend to.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Member for Christchurch South. Bearing in mind we have 10 more minutes left, or less.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The Honorable Member for Christchurch West Central is my geopolitical neighbor, and he's also my residential neighbor, and it would be a surprise if we were not friends, but I don't rise to speak on account of friendship. I really want to express deepest admiration for the work that he's doing, and I do have a vested interest in that I represent a constituency that has been for some time practicing recycling, and I want to commend the areas of Atlantic Shores and Graham Hall. And I want to say to the Minister and to say to you, ma'am, that as a result of the work of these two communities, we have been inspired, and the Minister who spoke has inspired me to extend programs of recycling into Carter's Gap, I can promise him that, and into Ashbyland in Oistins, a rather different demographic, but recycling is so important to this country. We have learned since we've come to this place that a lot of refuse collection becomes unnecessary if we teach our children to recycle. And I want to say in particular of the Ashbyland area, this is a small area where a lot of children live, they play on evenings, and there is this open area which is unsightly. And the Honorable Member for Christchurch West Central has promised to transform that area. I hope my colleagues are not jealous. They can also identify areas in their constituency, and he's quite willing to clean and green. He might even come to St. Thomas, but he is coming to Oistins. I don't want to excite any jealousy, but he's coming to Oistins with this project very shortly in a working class area, because even working class people are entitled to beautiful surroundings. I always say we go to the United States and we go to Britain, and it is so clean, it's so pristine, and we wonder how it is done. And I want again to commend to my colleagues that this can become a part of a local government scheme where we no longer have to depend exclusively on a ministry, but where people depend on their own efforts in cleaning their communities, because people live with a lot more dignity when their surroundings are clean. I look forward under this minister to a physical transformation of our social spaces. I really do look forward to that, so that we not only feel good about our government, but we feel good about ourselves as people. When we live in clean surroundings, it raises our self-esteem. So again, Madam Chair, I rise to commend the minister. I rise to commend this scheme to all of my colleagues in here, even the honorable member for St. Michael West. Your area needs a lot of work in terms. Yes, it does. It does. I'm an honest man. Yeah, it does. It does. And Christchurch West, ma'am, I am appalled that I drive along the south coast, and right outside hotels, you see grass growing in the street, as if the hoteliers don't know that it is there. And if that is cleaned and corrected, tourists feel a lot better about us, but more importantly, we feel a lot better about ourselves. Barbados is too untidy. And again, ma'am, let me commend the minister for the work that he is doing, for the work that he intends to do. Let me commend him for marrying his work with concepts of community organization. That is to say, people who live in communities organizing themselves to clean their own communities. So, Minister, I really do commend you, and I want to express gratitude for the work that he is doing. I'm obliged to you, ma'am.
I remember for Christchurch West Central.
Wrapping up, I just want to say to the Member of Parliament for St. Michael West that the Clean and Green project, which is going to transform the entire country, will not certainly leave out the parish of St. Michael West, because I know that the constituency, my apologies, the parish of St. Michael won't be left out. I didn't want me to get more magnanimous. But, of course, in the area of President Kennedy Drive, I am already on it. Certainly we'll be putting cameras there, because we have to also encourage Barbadians to be part of this process, and we need to implore in communities that there must be a type of empowerment and altruism in terms of these types of projects that will seek to beautify their very spaces that they live. And we can't talk enough and think that we have to lead from the front, and that's exactly what we are doing. So, Madam Chair, I beg that the tune of 3,027,375 stamp power.
Question is, I had 82 stamp power. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All honorable members against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 83, Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, in the amount of $10,186,190.
And we have 5 minutes to finish all the heads.
So just quick.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Honorable member for St. Philip South.
I fully respect the time. One honorable member from St. James North once said, "Night is upon us and sleep beckons." So, Madam Chair, I would just like to briefly explain that this supplementary for the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security is to increase food production. You will note that the period January to July of this year, the sector had seen an increase of 16%, and that increase was due obviously to the hard work that my staff has been doing at the ministry. And I want to use this occasion to thank them and commend them for the commitment they've given, especially during the COVID period when we had to increase production in Barbados. Madam Chair, it is important to note that what we are doing with this $10 million is to make sure we address a number of the things that were similar to what was raised by the honorable member for Christchurch West Central. And that is, if you drive along even Graham Hall by my ministry when it rains heavily, you will see all the dirt washed down into the road. It's very unsightly. And we are actually preparing now a cuscus grass program and lemongrass program right around Barbados to make sure that we stop the soil erosion. And at the same time, we're going to employ close to 200 persons to help us propagate and plant the cuscus and lemongrass, and then employ some small contractors as well to clear the wells on all of the BAMC plantations so that we can get proper runoff. The water will go back to the aquifer. And at the same time, drive increased food production, because when we clear those lands, we would then use the opportunity to increase production. The BAMC, we have 90 farmers at River. Yeah, we'll get there. 90 farmers at River and 50 at Spring Hall. and we are putting in the water harvesting our reservoirs for them. It's important for this to be stated, and those reservoirs will capture the water for those farmers who go through prolonged drought periods and lose their crops. So based on that rushed and brief presentation, I wish to beg that this Head 83 do now stand for it.
Question is that Head 83 stand for. All members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 87, Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, in the amount of $4,254,456.
Honorable member for St. Michael's Southeast.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this relates to the 240 monitors that have been placed across the nursery and primary schools to assist with the COVID health and safety protocols. As you well know, we are still very much within the COVID-19 pandemic, and our children obviously require as much assistance, making sure that they have on the mask in the classroom, ensuring that they observe the physical distancing, and of course that they sanitize their hands. I just want to say briefly, ma'am, that I'm very grateful to all of the persons who are lending a hand within the schools, all the persons who have continued to volunteer within the schools, as well as our teachers who, in very difficult circumstances, continue to be able to work with our children in the classroom to ensure that they have a sound education. And therefore, ma'am, with those few words, I beg to move that this head, which is a request for the sum of $4.254,456,000, do now stand part.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Quickly to ask the Honorable Minister, ma'am, through you, what is the process for application for these positions? I happen to be aware that some people in St. Michael West are being engaged for this purpose. I've never been directly spoken to about anybody about it. I suspect you're working through another agent who might find preference with you. That is improper, and I just want to put that on the record.
Honorable member for St. Michael Southeast.
I want to assure the honourable member for St. Michael West that, as with all programs that this government embarks on, we ensure that we properly vet the persons who are going into our schools to ensure that those persons are able to work with our children in the appropriate way. I believe what he's trying to insinuate, that persons have been handpicked in some way, and I want to assure the honourable member that those persons who have been engaged in our schools are ordinary Barbadians across the length and breadth of Barbados who have applied for the position and have been granted the opportunity to work in our schools.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
I don't know that my honorable friend has addressed my concern. Persons from St. Michael West may have been engaged for this process. I would like to know the mechanism for selecting such persons. Nobody has addressed me, the duly elected representatives of Michael West, on this matter. Taxpayers' money is being spent to pay these people. People of St. Michael West pay taxes. I believe I am owed the courtesy of being told we're doing this. This is how we're selecting the persons. And if members of parliament are being allowed to recommend persons for this program, such courtesy should have been extended to me, unless you prefer to work with some other agency on the ground in St. Michael West whom you might prefer to work with. I think that's improper. And I haven't had an answer there. I'll ask it out there.
Honourable member for St. Michael Southeast.
I'm mindful of the time, ma'am, but I do feel that the honourable member, as usual, is becoming a little bit more rattled than he needs to be. These persons, there are many persons who have applied through the Ministry of Education. Some of these persons are men and women who have been working in our schools, who would have indicated through the Ministry of Education that they wanted to work within the schools under this program. And therefore, if the honourable member wishes to, or has anyone who wants to apply, they can do so through the Ministry of Education.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Chair, I would imagine that some of the persons who are engaged in this process are men and women. I didn't have to be told that. I would imagine that some are men and women. If they're persons, they're going to be men and women. But if they come out of St. Michael West, I want to know the process of selection. You can't shout at me across the aisle and say if you have anybody recommend you can do so, approach me properly as the people's representative out of St. Michael West. Say we're doing this program. Other MPs have been asked to submit 3, 4, 5, 10, 12, 40 names. Do you have something to submit? That courtesy had not been shown to me. The people of St. Michael West elected me representative here, not anybody else, at least not yet. Y'all can work on that particular project. But to date, I am the duly elected representative of St. Michael West. I represent the taxpayers down there. They have to fund the money that pays these people, and I'm not satisfied with the response I'm getting from over there.
Honorable member for St. Michael Southeast, if you remember, wrap up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I can only give the honorable member the same assurances that I've given to all elected members of this chamber. There is a process. Member persons can apply as they do for all other positions. We have parent volunteers within our schools who assist. We have persons who readily come to the schools to assist. If he has persons who are interested in being a school monitor, perhaps he would do them well to be able to invite them to follow the relevant process. And those persons can be so selected.
Please don't.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that head 87 do not stand part.
Question is that head 87 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Somebody say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 91, Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment, in the amount of $1,980,580.
Honorable member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, Madam Chair, the sum of the money being requested under this particular program is to do some rehabilitation at the community center at Basheba, which has been long
Please move
coming,
that head stand part.
And I beg to move that head 92.
91.
91, sorry, stand part.
Thank you. Question is that head 91 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 92, Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, in the amount of $12 million.
Honorable member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The head is with respect to the urgent need for us to be able to have the necessary funding for the recapitalization of the Barbados Trust Fund Limited and also the Barbados Agency for Microenterprise Development, which will of course enable us to properly provision the small micro enterprise sector with necessary funds for sustainability in the aftermath of the ravages of COVID-19. I beg to move that head 92 stand part. There is a misprint along the way that needs to be corrected. Somewhere on one of the pieces of documentation, it says $12 as opposed to 12 million. And clearly the government would not want to offer only $12 in assistance. I'm grateful to my friend, the leader of the opposition, for drawing that typographical error to our attention. I have no doubt that all things are possible.
Yeah, he did. Honorable member for Christchurch East. Yes. Go ahead. I'm looking up for your interest. He did it.
Are you going to put a question on head 19?
I'm
looking out for your interest.
Before. One thing. The amendment.
I beg to, ma'am, as I indicated, that there is an error where the request is $12 as opposed to 12 million as defined in the breakdown. And I would want to propose an amendment that the documentation properly reflect $12 million for this head 92.
Question is that head 92 stand part with amendment. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Honorable member for Christchurch East Central.
Yes, Madam Chair, just for absolute clarity in terms of the resolution, under the addendum for head 83, there should be the insertion of the actual numbers 1047316 to reflect the actual text of head 33. Under head 86, it should read 65805,787 as opposed to 85805,787, and the honorable member just corrected head 92 to indicate $12 million in the actual text. And so, Madam Chair, I beg to move that this resolution do now pass. As amended.
Question is that this resolution as amended stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it. Honorable member for Christchurch East Central.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I beg to move that you report to His Honor the Speaker the pass of war money resolution in Standing Finance Committee.
With amendments.
With amendments.
All right, question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one money resolution with amendment. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of the Standing Finance Committee has reported the passing of one money resolution with amendment in committee. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we have come to the end of today's sitting, and speaking on the adjournment, sir, we come back on the 17th of November at 10 a.m. I therefore want to just take this opportunity to wish all parties in the race a good race and a very peaceful race. I know there will only be one winner, and we are hopeful and expect that there will be a call for more when that bell is rung. But sir, I do want to wish everyone well, and in particular the member for St. Michael West, that we can continue to have cordial relations and that we will have productive debates when the time comes. So I beg to move, sir, that the House be adjourned until the 17th of November at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until the 17th day of November, Tuesday, the 17th day of November at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All our members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber. Where's it? Where is it?
We just have to revert to the process. Normally on the process of a money resolution, it has to be read the first time, second time, and then agreed to. And that process was not followed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read the first time.
Question that the resolution be read here first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned resolution be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that the resolution do not pass. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Yes. This House stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 17th day of November at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.